the tricky part is that before that, when that in utero, race and gender stuff is coming into play, period.
Yeah.
And so I really do honestly feel there's a way to have an age-appropriate conversation about anything with a child.
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jennie@jennieb.co. Let's get started. Veronique, also known as V, is the founder and lead educator at Ampersand Workspace. She works in race and gender, giving organizations, groups, and companies the tools to enact anti-racist and gender-inclusive values within their organizations to create a productive, inclusive culture. Veronique shapes mindsets, builds skills, and creates lasting impact through Heritage Month and Identity holiday workshops, targeted trainings, and consulting. Her business prompted V to retire from childcare, where she spent more than 20 years as a caregiver of all sorts, alongside other professional endeavors. Veronique is still very invested in the lives of all her littles around the world, and she loves them all dearly, especially since she gets to give them back to their parents. Welcome back to the Relational Parenting Podcast, everybody. Welcome our guest, Veronique Porter. Welcome. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, how you doing?
There it is. All right. So we are on. And Veronique, please tell us who you are and what you're up to in the world today.
So my name is Veronique Porter. I often go by V as well. And I run a business called Ampersand Workspace, where I work with groups and organizations around race and gender to help them have a better, more welcoming, productive workplace culture and environment. But I spent almost 20 years, maybe it was more than 20 years, something around the 20-year mark, even though I'm not that old, in childcare. It's my longest running career, and I hired in 2021. So I did all sorts of different types of childcare, different ages, the whole shebang. My favorite are babies and toddlers.
Yes.
I was just doing that alongside of my previous career in international development, my travels around the world. I've done it internationally. And when I started Ampersand Workspace, I finally needed all of my bandwidth and all of my time to put towards a business. I'd never done it before. But I miss my littles, and I literally have littles all around the world. And they really do delight my life.
Yeah. You called yourself the forever auntie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
I love littles, and I will spend all the time with them, and I will play with them and do all of that. But my absolute favorite thing about them is giving them back to their parents. So, yeah.
That's a sort of kind of grandparenting then.
Right?
In a way, I'm happy to be a part of the village, right? Like, I'll be a caregiver in whatever way that I can and help out. But they got to go back home at some point.
Right? You can always give them back.
Yeah.
And you've got them in France and Africa. And where are all your littles internationally?
So I have littles in various spots in the U.S. I have littles in Mali, West Africa. They're not so little anymore, actually. They're all kind of... it's been a long time.
That's the problem with 20 years of doing it. They're not little forever.
Right.
You know?
How did that happen? I have littles in Nantes, France, and I got an official godson there as well. And little spots all over the U.S.
Neat.
Yeah.
I love it. And when we were chatting on the phone many months ago to set you up as a guest, you had messaged me and you were like, hey, I'm also a nanny of 20 years. Cause that's something that I put in my post when I reached out to our group to get guests. And, we had a very similar story of nannying for 20 years, taking care of children in various places for 20 years, and then transitioning to being business owners. So we had a lot to talk about in the parenting space, and like coming
Oh,
from it as an outsider, quote unquote.
mm-hmm.
Because even though we don't have our own children, for me yet, we both had been parenting. Like when you're a nanny, it is so intimate. It's such an intimate job, and I don't even like calling it a job, because it's such like
It feels weird.
yeah, you become more like a forever family member.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you
like you
get
said, like auntie,
attachments and
there are children all over the world that call me auntie.
Yeah, because you're in
Yeah.
people's homes, right? So you see all the
Mhm.
ins and outs of their family as you're
Mhm.
also helping to, raise their children, right? So you're supporting or uplifting whatever they're investing in their kids, and you're having
Yep.
those serious conversations. You're seeing their developmental process and contributing to it hopefully
Yes.
positively. So there's no way you walk away from that and it's like, yeah, it's just a job. I'm logging off. It's like you're
Yeah.
like Papa Rick's invested,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
A little different than
There's
like being a Sunday school teacher or even a school teacher, where you're
Mhm.
expected to go back in the closet at the end of the day and come back out. It's more of a parenting situation.
Yeah. When you're with them many hours weekly on a repeating basis, if not more waking hours than the parents even are. There are some positions where
Yeah,
I was awake and actively caring for the children for more hours in the week than the parents were.
yeah,
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, at that point, those parents are like asking me what to do with the kids. They're like,
yeah,
this behavior is happening, or have you noticed this, or have you, whatever. And I'll be like, that's developmentally normal. We're working on it. This is what we're doing.
Mhm.
yeah,
And share what I'm doing. And then they do it, on the weekends when I'm not there, so that we're having like a consistency of care, across the board, and vice versa. If they're like, hey, we've really noticed so-and-so starting to like engage in this is what we want to do to mitigate, can you help us please? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm on board. Like, I'll do
Yeah.
that with them too. Right. And it's really like you step in as like a third parent teammate.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
it's
definitely a
very,
week. Definitely a team for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
When you guys were nannying, you women were nannying and helping out with families. Did you ever do
Ooh,
it with
yeah.
single parent families? I mean, was it like was it ever two moms or a mom or a guy and you, or was it mostly pairs of parents? I've kind of hooked up on
Really good
got
question.
fascinated by the fatherlessness thing
Mm.
going
Yeah.
on in the world, and single parenting is a real common thing out there for parents. And were you able to nanny for single parents, or is that, I mean, that would be hard to afford, I would think.
Yeah, I think that like I can't recall a family where I was like babysitting here and there, sure, but
Hmm.
like consistently nannying or even like after school care or something like that. Even there have been like continual babysitting sort of things, or like I've done tutoring in the past, so maybe that. Um,
Yeah,
but as far as like actual nannying or like really long term like
long term.
house care,
Yeah,
usually I haven't come across any single parents, but I will say that I was raised by a single mom, and so that really contributed to like me doing this early on. And it feels in some way that I'm like naturally good at it, but it's just that I had training so much earlier on. But
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
they're my siblings, so I don't know if it's an innate natural thing for me. It's more so that I've had that training so early on and so deep in helping out my mom when we were growing up, in that
yeah.
that definitely related to the ways in which I was able to do that as a caregiver when I was helping out with other families.
Learning. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, and a lot, I think, comes from being exposed to childcare, whether it's older sibling helping
Mhm.
mom, or whether it's babysitting for young girls, going out and doing babysitting and learning to deal with children that were not their younger siblings, that kind of training women up to raise kids. There's so much of that missing now. Going into other people's homes. I bet the whole industry of babysitting as a teenager is different now.
Yeah, I don't even know if they do that as much anymore. Most
Yeah,
of it
going into people's homes and
times perhaps, but yeah, also folks are looking for somebody that they feel like is reliable or trustworthy, and we don't look at adolescents that way anymore. They're so and not to invoke like a helicopter caregiver sort of thing, but it's like I really want to make sure that the kids are good, right? And like we have all the things. And so I think back in the day, it was very much so like, you just need to keep them alive, 16-year-old, 14-year-old.
That's right.
Yeah.
Minimize the blood.
Like, no, they have routines, they have structure, they have things. So now we need to be really responsible to do those things. So it's falling away culturally for sure. Not that it doesn't exist, but it's definitely falling away a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was going to say, different. I see it depends on, I've seen differences in income levels. So parents who can afford the luxury of a full-time nanny, or even a part-time nanny, are wanting someone who is 25 plus. A lot of them are looking for someone in their late 20s, early 30s, or they're looking for like older women who have like retired, but who are still like running around, capable, et cetera, who know child development, who are experienced, have 5+ years of experience with children, especially like if they've got a newborn, they're looking for a newborn care specialist. But those are people who with dual incomes, and they're like doctors, lawyers, in marketing and finance, making a lot of money. I've seen in smaller towns, in areas where when I do like job searches and stuff on different websites for jobs, there are a lot, or even in a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm in, there are lower income families who hire teenagers, not like 14-year-olds, but like 16 and up. But they are looking at like these teenagers are posting like, I've taken CPR. I know this. I know, like I have first aid, CPR. I've got this. I've been, I'm the oldest sibling. I've been helping with my siblings for a long time, and they're hiring them not necessarily as full-time nannies, but as like after school nannies, with older kids, things like that. But it is definitely, nannying has also become more of a career, whereas before it was like a minimum wage kind of entry level gig that usually girls, sometimes boys, but usually girls were doing like while they were in high school or college. And it wasn't like a career option. And it wasn't seen or respected as one either, until really the last like 5 years. Yeah. But to answer your question really quick, Dad, I did work for one single mom. I was like 19. It was the summer that I was 19, I think. And she hired me, but she wasn't paying me like, because she had one income, right? She was divorced. And so she had her full-time job. She needed a full-time nanny for her 3 kids for the summer. And she said that she had applied to, I think it was the state, that she was getting a child care stipend, that she had applied for, and that she would pay me when that came through. Well, that came through at the end of the summer. And so for 3 months of work though, I got paid, I think like $800. Yeah. Like
it's
at the time,
amazing.
I was 19. I was just like, I was kind of like, I didn't care that much, but yeah, I mean, it was nothing. And,
not representative of the value.
Yeah.
Really.
But I mean, anyway, that was also 16 years ago, 17.
Mm.
17
There's that
16,
20
I don't know.
years
How old am
creeping up
I?
on you again.
16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. When you said, V, when you said at the beginning, you're like, I was in childcare for 20 years. Not that I'm that old. Like, I say that all the time. I'm like, okay, I've also been in childcare for over 20 years now.
Because I think
I'm
people look
sorry.
at me crazy, like, how? You know,
Like, how? Yeah, like, you're not old enough for that. And I'm like, I
I
know,
started
but
when I
it's
was
true.
6. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not counting 6-year-old. Yeah.
As soon as I got
No.
out of kindergarten, I was in childcare.
Right. My dollies will vouch for me.
Well, when you're a kid, if you're helping a single parent, that's really kind of probably true. Watch your little brother for a few minutes while I run outside and get the mail or whatever. Whatever. All the
I mean,
single moms need help, man.
run the household, right? Like, I was
Yeah,
taking the siblings back and forth to school, making sure
yeah.
the rooms are clean. I literally helped her manage the household in that way.
Fully function. Yeah. Fully functioning parenting partner.
Yeah.
Ooh. Jennie
So
was talking about parentifying. We had an episode about parentifying kids. That's I
Yeah.
just love this. Drawing box. I think in boxes and arrows, and so all the little topics we come up with, it's like, well, okay, sometimes you need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So V, were you the oldest?
Ironically enough, no.
Okay.
I always joke my family like I'm the oldest. I am the oldest girl though, which gender
Yeah.
and gender.
Yeah.
But my older brother is like almost 10 years older than me, so he was just in a completely different place, doing a completely different thing, and he helped the household out in different. He just wasn't there day to day.
Yeah. Not to be sexist or anything, but there's boys and girls are different. That's the boys are not,
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, but that leads us to the topic that I am really excited for you to share with our audience, with our parents who are looking at having, these with their older kids, having these really difficult conversations, especially with the social climate today, with race and gender being such hot topics, and really the veil being pulled back, because it's not that these things haven't existed forever and constantly. It's just that no one's been paying attention to them, except for the people suffering. Right. And so I am curious about the work that you are doing, not only with corporations, but what you've also seen, and what you can share with our parents, in the way of like how to have these conversations with their children as they're entering school, as they're growing up, as they're seeing the real world, and experiencing these conversations from peers, or other adults in their lives.
I think in general, race and gender ended up being such a heavy topic, even for adults, right? And we hold so many sensitivities and so much discomfort around that. That's literally a lot of what my work is with adult folks in the office, is helping unpack some of that, right? Because there isn't do that, right? The internet is not necessarily a safe space, and often our family friends are an echo chamber, right? And so if that's our experience when we have children, when we're around children, we want to shield them from that. We want to protect them from that, and they don't have to deal with that right now. But the tricky part is that before that, when that's in utero, race and gender stuff is coming into play. Period. And so I really do honestly feel there's a way to have an age-appropriate conversation about anything with a child. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy. And, that idea of a parent being on all the time, and then they get, one of those topics, and it's like, I don't have it. What's the language?
That's right.
So I'm not saying it's easy, but we have not shield children from that until they expose it in the world, until it becomes a problem. We need to start preparing them from day one. And, we talk about indoctrinating children. As parents, we're always telling children what we think they need to know in order to be good human beings on this earth. And those race and gender conversations are part of that. You don't want to be on the defense of, they've already been exposed to so much, it's already a problem now how can I correct it? You can give them tools, again, age appropriate tools from day one that really prepares them. So when, for example, if I were to have a child and, my child goes to school and gets called a derogatory term, I would
What do
hope
you?
I've prepared my child. And it's not that it's not going to hurt. It's not that it's not going to be a conversation, right? But it'll be a
Right.
different conversation if I've already been talking about race and gender with that child versus if they had no idea whatsoever. There are all these stories that come out now about adults my age that are like, the first time I realized I was Black was when I was called a name at school, right?
Oh,
Like
nice.
Black, right? When you realize you were other in society or
Yeah.
something like that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want my child to go into that blind. I would want my child to already have a healthy sense of what being Black is so that
Yeah.
when it's called, they're like, I know that doesn't define me, right?
Yeah.
We still,
Yes, like a pride, a built foundation.
like it
Yes.
bounces opposed to cutting deeper, right?
Yes.
So, and it applies to all children of all races and all gender. Having these conversations, again, age appropriate, that's the tricky part. But having those conversations when they arise beforehand, as they come up, and being able to just kind of like give them those little tidbits, it really does help prepare them so that even when they're having those same age appropriate things happening in school, they know how to deal. They know how to talk to their friends about it. And they might even be, if the leader of that conversation with their peers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really why we're doing this. I had dinner with a couple of guests I'd like to have on next year. Jennie brought up, kind of got me thinking about the fatherlessness things. There's a whole group, a large group of people that are being raised that haven't been exposed, don't know that. I mean, you're talking about getting out in front. What's the difference between indoctrination and preparing?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we know this is going to happen around here, and so you can call it. And I'd be interesting to pick apart the people who call that kind of thing indoctrination, but it's like, hey, this is going to happen, and I'd like to get out in front of it so that when it happens, I know what to say. They know it's not right. I was kind of a sheltered, protected, I think, kid. I was the fifth of five.
Me too.
And a lot of well, you weren't the fifth.
Denver
but
was a rude awakening for baby Jennie.
Exactly. I remember she called once and had jumped out, just pulled up to the convenience store for a minute and jumped out of the car to run in and left her purse in there, and there was somebody sitting in the car right there waiting for that and ripped her off. You could see the video. I think you had a piece of the video or something. You could see the second she slammed the door and headed in there, the guy next to her was coming out of his car. They were just, and it's like, we don't get that in small town America very
I've never
much.
locked my car doors in my life. I got robbed 3 times and my car got stolen before I finally fucking figured out to lock everything, hide everything, and don't leave yourself vulnerable. That's how small town
And
I
I
was. It took
remember-
like 5 years for me to figure out that I lived in a big city and to stop fucking around with your shit.
Yeah, you got to look. And I felt bad a little bit going, I don't know how I would have prepared you for that. That's
In our
kind
town,
of your job as your parent it's like, well, I'm sorry that plane fell on your head. I wish I had known how to prepare you better for that. But that's after the fact. What you're doing, V, is terrific. Is let's everybody get it out there. And I think this is a good platform for it because everybody's flipping through, looking at videos. If we can get that out there and get people thinking about it, then the world's a better place for it. And thanks for being here. This gets us thinking.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And today it's a little bit easier, right? In that like children, because kids are like on iPads and on screens, right? Like they're seeing different shows, the characters, right?
Yeah.
Question. You can buy all sorts of diverse books that show different types of lifestyles and life and color and gender expression and all sorts that literally, normalizes that people are just different, right? And so that starts to normalize that from day one. But I'm often surprised, and I think this is why I have so much fun around children, the ways in which their curiosity manifests. And so like a question that you would anticipate that an adult would ask is not the way the kid is going to ask, and it's not the subject the kid think about, or even like what they like to focus on. And so it's, again, you don't have to, sit your child down and give them lessons on like, how to do this and how to do that. But at the same time, when they have that random question, instead of brushing it off, to really have a conversation about it,
Yes. Or even in daily life and experiences, like when you have your 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old with you and you're running around running errands at the grocery store or whatever, like they might run, they might point out someone who looks different than them or whatever. And you can have or run into someone at preschool, or they, a teacher said something about this, that boys do this and girls do that, like whatever it is, the topics will come up very, very organically. And to take that moment and, like you said, not brush it aside, but take that opportunity, like the experience is presenting itself, have that conversation, let it be a little teaching moment, take 5 minutes and be like, that's so interesting. Your teacher said that, in our house, this is what we value. This is what we see. This is the world, this is how the world works, and have that conversation.
It's even small things. Like earlier when Papa Rick corrected himself about saying you guys, that was something that I started doing last year where I was trying to eradicate doing that all the time. And I still slip up too. But
I try.
Thanks. That's all we can do is try. Progress over perfection. And I said you guys, and then I corrected and said like y'all, because I love a y'all.
There you
go. One of the girls, she's about 8 years old at the moment. She was like, "What's wrong with you guys? Like, why wouldn't you say you guys?" And
nice question.
So I was like, well, I just, there are a lot of different reasons, but like, look at all of you. Like, you're a girl. The other 3 were actually boys, but I was like, you're a girl, and so it doesn't make sense for me to call you all guys because you're not all guys.
Yeah.
It would be really weird and jarring if I called you all girls. So I really appropriate. Just say what it is, and I said I'm really trying to work on not saying you guys because that's not appropriate for everybody, and everybody's not necessarily a guy, so I don't want to normalize that anymore in my own vocabulary. And she thought about it and was like, well, everybody does it or says it, and I was like, it's not something that I'm going to correct you about, but it's something that I've chosen because it's in line with how I want to operate in the world, and I don't think that's the right way to go about it. So that's why I'm correcting myself, but it's a choice that I've made for me, even if society is not on board with it.
Yeah.
And okay, kept moving, started talking about something else.
Yeah.
But
that's a real good point. I mean, we have to start by changing ourselves, right? If you want the world to be different, if not me, if not if not now, when, and without
look it up,
and you want to do it so that people get on board with it. You don't want to be over militant with it, because I mean the language doesn't even have constructs for that. I mean we grow up saying you guys, and there isn't really a y'all is kind of a Southern thing. It's like sometimes there just aren't the words for it. We got to kind of come at it organically. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you guys, for me, I was like, I had like a little like hint of pride, Dad, when you corrected yourself. I didn't even think of it as anything until you corrected it.
Oh,
and I was just like, oh, like that's like, he's like, your awareness, and you're like enlightening yourself, like all of those things. But to me, the phrase "you guys" has always been neutral. The word "guys" has never, like, if you're saying like all those guys over there, then it means I'm talking about a group of males, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm just like, come on, you guys, like listen, or whatever, that was always neutral to me.
Right.
But that's also because it's been normalized and used in different instances, et cetera, and to bring the awareness to the language that we're using to be more precise with our language, to be, it's even past serving to bring awareness to gender, and being sensitive to that issue, and the comfort of the people that you're addressing. It also just makes you a better speaker and communicator. Like, it makes you pay attention to the rest of your language,
more precise,
and how you affect the world.
Recognition. It's bordering political correctness, which can be overdone, but it's also more
Mhm.
precise, and it recognizes that there is diversity. There are people, especially with all the transgender stuff going on. There are people who that affects them, and so
Yeah.
it's like, well, let's be polite and let's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. I mean, there also can be people that can be offended. Sometimes people are just in a tough place, and
Yeah.
just all they need is one more. You're on my last nerve, kind of thing. And so it's like, okay, well, we can pretty easy to just make our language a little more precise and stay away. Don't be stepping on people's nerves if you don't have to. Is I don't know. For me, political correctness a lot of time really just boils down to being polite and considerate. Instead of
And
Yeah.
respectful. Yeah.
yeah, instead
Yeah.
of just being, well, I have a right to say that, and so I'm going to be ignorant.
I say
Yeah.
this is completely separate, but I say to people all the time who like to argue with me about the use of the N word and how they get to use it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Usually people that look like me that I'm having this argument with. And it's like,
Mm.
if one person has expressed that it is possibly problematic to a group of people,
Yeah.
Mhm.
is that not enough for you?
Yeah.
Like, what that like you are holding on to the right to say that so much
Yeah.
for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you need to say it
Help
at
me
the
understand why you need to bother everybody. Yeah.
So it is one of those things where, to me, it always boils down to the idea of like, there's a difference between I didn't know and I know, and I'm
Mhm.
still going to choose to do this because you don't want to respect or acknowledge or just treat people with kindness.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a big red flag for me when people do that, and just in terms of being part of the tribe,
Mm-hmm.
the being part of the village, and people deliberately, when it becomes apparent someone is deliberately kind of irritating half the tribe here around half of our group, it's like, what is, and their justification is, well, I have a right to do that. Then I'm like,
So
okay, yeah. If that's the only reason you're doing that is to exercise your power over other people, then
Right.
you're not, I don't want you in my
See, and then the behaviorist in me goes, what's the need behind that behavior, behind that
tribe.
need for control, that need to hold
Mhm.
on to that sovereignty, that right. I have the right. It's like, okay, that person is feeling not in control of their life.
Yeah.
Somewhere in
Yeah.
there, they're
Yeah.
feeling like they don't have power. And
Mhm.
so that's like where the tribe can come in and be, and this is like, in a regular modern setting where, like, if you use the N word and you say, hey, like, that's not cool, that's really derogatory, please don't say that word around me, please don't say it around other Black people ever. Like,
Yeah. Just don't say it. Just say, yeah.
and you
Give it up.
kindly explain that to me, and my reaction to you is to be like, I'm an American and I can say whatever I want to say. And like,
Yeah.
in that situation, you're not going to then seek to heal me or look at the need behind my behavior. But in a tribal setting or in a home family setting, like, where are the places that we can respond to people who make that claim, who argue for that grip on control? And where can we tap into that and speak to it and help them understand the effect that they're having? And it's not that we're not trying to take your power away. No one's trying to
Yeah.
control you. And you are in
Yeah.
control of your life. And in fact, the way that you're expressing yourself is like there's a cause and effect, and you can control the effect you have on the world. That's the control that you have.
Hmm.
And I love that you brought that up because, I feel like at the root of all this race and gender stuff, whether you're a kid or an adult, it is about this power, right? It's about a
Yeah.
power dynamic. It
It
always has.
is. It is. Yeah.
Yes.
And you hit the nail on the head when you're saying, when folks are really pushing back, even when the rhetoric makes no sense, even when it's just because I want to, because I have the right, it does come back to, I feel like a loss of power and I need to exert that over someone. So
Yeah.
complete.
Mhm.
But that's why for me, it's much easier to have small conversations, right?
Yeah.
And so, like,
Yeah.
safe place because I don't know you, you don't know me. We haven't figured out tone. What's my
Yeah.
reason for trying to correct you versus nothing's going to get done.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a confrontation.
Part of it is like, let's have this conversation in a way that's safe and
Mhm.
creating
Yeah.
that safe. Like, even though I feel like you're very wrong, you, I can see that you're hurting, right? So that grace is important.
Exactly.
But I see you
Yeah.
as a person. I see you as an individual, and this isn't necessarily like a personal frailty that can't be fixed. That you're completely broken, or you're completely trash, or you're completely rotten. There's something there that
Yeah.
needs to be fixed, right? And I
Yeah. Yeah.
that in a conversation. But if we're
Yeah.
talking about on the internet or just a random person in passing, we're not getting anywhere with that. But with people we
Right.
know in a family, in a community, approaching them with that sort of grace and that sort of understanding does help you get to the root of the problem much more quickly. But also, how can we come up with methods for you to like understand a bit better how we can be in community together as opposed to there being a power relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. Needing
Yes.
to exert compensation, that need to exert your power
Yeah.
in, over other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did an
Yeah.
episode.
Powerlessness is not good.
We did an episode, I can't remember, a few episodes ago, and we got into talking about the only thing you are in control of is yourself and the way that you respond to the world
Yeah.
around you, your
Period.
own actions, your own
Gets right down
choices.
to it.
You cannot control other people. You cannot control the chaos of the things that happen that occur in the world. Like the weather is the perfect example of that. No one can control the weather, right? We can't control natural disasters. I mean, there's some climate change stuff that plays into that, right? But you can't go push a button and control it, right?
Right.
And so we touched on that in a past episode, and it applies here that all you have is your choice, your actions, and the way to make the choices like that you want to make. Like, what effect do you want to have on this world, and make choices according to that, to your values, not based on what I need, what I can be in control of, who I can have power over, or whatever. Like, you don't have power over anyone except
Period.
maybe your child, in which case it's
Well,
abuse.
Yeah. I mean, you can. I mean, parenting, especially, that's an especially powerful parenting concept, I think, is yes, I can grab you and lock you in the closet, and I am bigger than you. Is that one of your values? I mean, is that what you,
Right.
because that's what they're going to do to their kids when they grow
Right.
up. If
You're
if
spreading that into the world.
So yeah, so it kind of requires a certain amount of relaxation to be able, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of being in a place where you can stop and think about what you're doing, as opposed to feeling like, I think the compensation when people are just exerting power to exert power. I think that's a sign they're coming from someplace pretty tough where you have to exert power just to keep people from coming over and grabbing you and locking you in a closet or what. They're coming from a different place. And so that's where diversity, being familiar with the concept of diversity, and being exposed to things, having a little broader experience is good. That's why parochialism, being isolated is not good. You got to get out in the world. That's why I have so much respect for I went to France to learn French. It's like, wow, I wish I'd have had the guts to do that when I was young. Let's get up and go see how another go to Africa, go to France, go see how other parts of the world work. And so then you're not quite so surprised when somebody steals your purse when you leave it sitting in your car. It's like, I've been in a big city before. Oh yeah,
right.
Good to have experiences.
V, do you? I've been thinking about this for about 20 minutes. Usually things disappear in that amount of time, and I'm like, well, it's gone now. But this one has stuck around, so I feel like it's important.
I write stuff down. Yeah.
The earlier you were talking about having these conversations with our children, and you were talking about different races and kids have experiencing these things out in the world and being proactive. I'm curious with your expertise, if you feel, let's see, how do I want to ask this? Do you feel like different families, different races, that conversation looks different inside of different families of different races? A
like
white family
Asian,
versus an
Black.
Asian family versus a Black family.
Absolutely. I
Hmm.
don't know if y'all were hearing a lot of those same things in the past couple of years around like the talk that Black people have with, and my mother's never had the talk with me, in part because I was born and raised in Chicago. Like, we were, negative interactions with the police were like day, or like ways in which Chicago is one of the most diverse cities in the world, but also very, very segregated, always has been, continues to be.
Yeah.
So growing up in that sort of era, I never had to have the talk, but this idea of like being aware of your Blackness very early on, right? And what that means, people treat you, and how you are supposed to act in certain spaces so that people treat you well. If I'm downtown Chicago, how people are perceiving me, and especially even then versus now. So that idea of, the conversations that I'm having out of my home versus like a white family who is not talking about race at all, who's not necessarily, equipping their children to think about themselves in public spaces with the perception of race on their brain, right?
Yeah.
Too, right? Where it's like, when boys go out and about, it's like, you'll be fine. As to where when girls go out, it's like, watch your drink, protect yourself, stay with your friends, don't, do, if you shouldn't wear XYZ thing. So of course those conversations are different. A lot of what I'm trying to tell folks now is that yes, those conversations should look different because, the way in which a white family talks about race and the way a Black family talks about race is completely different because of the way in which they experience race. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't be talking, right? Like, so in the same way that like Black are having to talk about race in general with their children, everybody else should be well, right? So about race and how that plays out into the world. And so that shouldn't be something that, kids are having conversations about in college critically. They should be having those conversations critically in their homes from day one,
It makes me think of how just recently, especially with like the Me Too movement, the discussion about sexual predators was just with young girls and women. And we were the victims, right? Most of the time, we were the victims of that violence instead of the discussion being amongst boys and men and raising your sons to not be like that.
We're tough. We don't like to talk about that.
To control themselves, to have how to respect what consent looks like, etc. The conversation was simply about girls and how to protect yourself and victim blaming. And I think that there's a parallel with race here in that Black families have been having this discussion for centuries. Whereas white families or other races who have not experienced that level of racism were either completely fucking blind to it, or were perpetuating the racism. And so it was either getting swept under the rug and not talked about, or it was being perpetuated. Meanwhile, the victims of the racism were the ones having the conversations about how to protect themselves, how to act, and being victim blamed, basically. And so I see this responsibility in white families, in Asian, and in any family. But I mean, let's be honest, the white families, colonizers, like that's the kind of the base the source of it, where it all begins is there needs like what do they call it? Color blindness. Was a hashtag that came up during the pandemic with all the race revelations of white families not being like, oh, well, I don't see color. I'm not racist because I don't see color. And the response from victims of racism was, well, that's not helpful either because it's real and this is happening to us. And you need to see color and have an understanding of what's occurring.
Yeah, that's sticking your head in the sand.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, the I'm also seeing there's a new movie out, Sound of Freedom, about the slave trade, the
Yes.
sexualization, right? You know, and it's not, slavery hasn't always only happened to black people. I mean, that's been around. Conquered nations enslaved the other people, and it's kind of a social thing. You can't ignore it. It's not like, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. It's like, yeah, you need to acknowledge it and adapt. People have trauma. When people have a trauma, you acknowledge, okay, I'm not going to pick on that particular
Yeah.
scab of yours, just to be part of just so the tribe runs better.
Hmm.
And now we're finding out that, the Jeffrey Epstein and all that, there's a lot more that I like the internet because it helps. That kind of thing is easier to hide. Slavery,
Mm.
whether it's trafficking or whatever, it doesn't. What's the newspaper motto about truth dies in darkness or something like that? It's bringing to light a bunch of things that we are now having to, at least in this country, deal with and find words for, because it was so well hidden for so long. We didn't really have the words. Like Eskimos are supposed to have 400 words for snow, and most people have one or two or three about snow. We're having to develop vocabulary in the language to even talk about some of this stuff at
Yeah.
the level, when you start to dig into it and get precise with your language. It's like, well, I don't really have a word for that. What do we call that? You're having to make up words. So we
Yeah.
experiment with color blindness. It's like, well, no, that's not really quite right. And I enjoy watching the world evolve. It's not always comfortable or nice, but as thinking human beings, if we're going to make the world a better place, we got to learn how to do it. And to
Yeah.
tie it all back, parenting is where it starts. As parents, we need to get with it and figure out how to talk to our kids and other kids. And it's a valuable skill. It's good to be aware of this stuff. You can't start until you're aware of it.
Period. Yeah.
Sorry, see, when I talk I go for a while.
No, but
No, I love it. I was listening.
I'm literally reflecting on the fact that like it's really refreshing, I think, to hear from someone of your generation that like this is important conversation to have, and this is important discourse to take up, and these are important things for us to work on. Because I think the overall idea is that Gen Z is doing this work, and Gen Z is pushing this forward, and you are Gen Z, and here you are.
Gen
Is
Z has no clue how to proceed because they haven't been trained up. We kind of screwed up later generations in some ways, and so we're like grandparents now. It's time to start fixing that a little bit.
Yeah, I just think it's really powerful to hear, like, to see you, like, correcting your language, and to hear how much importance you place on trying to, again, be a part of the larger community, right? Not just saying like, well, in my day we did XYZ thing, so it excuses you in some way. And we're used to a lot of generation doing that, and so it's so refreshing. Like, you could go on forever, and I'm like, yeah, because like I love hearing that from someone of your generation. It's super refreshing to hear.
I wish I could bottle it. Someone at a family gathering was talking about how horrible it was that Mexicans were crossing the border on the south of the United States. And I said, so how does that different than white people coming from Europe and showing up and exterminating the Indians? And there was just no
Native
conversation
Americans.
to be had about that.
Native
Yes.
Americans.
Yes. Yeah.
Indians are in
I'm
India.
still a victim of my,
See,
I'm
right?
not. So just to prove I'm not that enlightened, you're right. And
Coach,
we are products of our history to some extent. That gets into the whole. What do you do about people in the past? All you can control is yourself, and you work at it.
yeah.
I want to start a drinking game now of dad jokes. Anytime you hear a dad joke, take a shot. Or anytime dad or someone on the podcast corrects dad,
yeah.
what in
When I
enlightening
say a
language.
classically boomer thing, yeah. Boomer language or millennial language or Gen Z language or what's in the middle there? Gen X? Is there a Gen X after Gen Z or before Gen Z?
Gen X is after
I got to go
you.
back
So
and read.
boomer, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z.
There it is. Okay.
Elder millennial, though, is an important one. Elder millennials are not the
we
same.
get more and more precise. As we discuss things, we learn to be more precise, and we need a new word. Elder millennial. Yep.
Yeah.
Just the way it works. You start talking. That's why when you talk to PhD guys in something or other talking, is you can't understand them because they had to make up all these special words to even have a conversation about their stuff. That just made up words.
V, I would love for you to share. I know that most of your work with your business is with companies and corporations and going in and helping them create a safer, more welcoming, more diverse environment. And you're teaching these things. You're teaching more precise language and how to make an inclusive environment in the workplace and all of those things. I'm curious if you can translate a few of those pointers to parents who are looking for advice on how to initiate or engage in conversations about gender and about race in the home.
Yeah. I think something that Papa Rick said earlier, which is a big part of my work, even though I work with teams or organizations, for me, it's always coming down to the individual, right? Because that has to make the choice. That individual has to choose to educate themselves. That individual has to choose to be a better manager, to uphold some of the culture that is being, distributed throughout the company, right? So it has to come down to that individual, and that individual is the one who's in the driver's seat. Yeah. And so it's similar with parenting, where parents will be like, well, how do I talk to my kids about diversity, and all of their friends are white and look like them and were raised in the same type of neighborhoods and have the same type of degrees and the same type of jobs. Yeah. So the example that you are putting towards your kids, you can't teach them something that you don't understand enough to implement into your life, and that you
exactly.
So it's really about that parent, again, taking that initiative to say, this is important to me. How do I, in the same way that you might buy your kid a book that has diverse characters, how many books are you reading, or how many articles are you reading by diverse authors, right? Mm-hmm. So really it starts with that parent, with that individual. Modeling. And then it also starts with the union. Modeling, right? Yep. But also you can't teach what you don't know.
That's a bumper sticker. I like bumper sticker sayings. You can't teach what you don't understand. Yeah.
You can't teach it, and you can't, and not even a model. You can't teach something that you, but then also modeling is really important, because if what you're saying conflicts with what you're doing, they're getting a and then they have to choose which one they decide to believe.
Yeah, they more often come away with what you modeled, not what you say. Do what I say, not what I do, kind of thing. Yeah.
So that's thing number one. And thing number two, that also plays into the union if we're talking about a partnership, even if it's co-parenting, if it's an actual marriage or an actual romantic partnership, like y'all got to be on the same page. So y'all have to talk through how you're going to approach some of these things around gender. I have a really good set of friends, and I've worked with them and their kids before, but now I just adore them and their family, and we're really good friends, and I visit them like twice a year. And they have conversations around the ways in which they parent the kids, right? And like, for example, pointed out how like the dad babies the girl, right? She's the oldest even, but he babies her. Yeah. She gets away with things because she knows she can like kind of manipulate dad. And so mom was able to like point something out, right? The ways in which like he favors the boy this way or favors her that way. And have that conversation, not in a way that's like, you're a horrible parent, but I've noticed some things. Mm-hmm. And what do you think happened? That's what I was talking about. So those sort of conversations about gender and race and parenting have to happen with your co-parent, with your village, with your tribe as well, right? And same way you have a conversation with, if you had a nanny to say, these are some behaviors I noticed, or this is something that I want to reinforce, or whatever. It sounds like, oh yeah, it's automatically happening, but it doesn't. I think people assume they're on the same page with their partner, or assume they're on the same co-parent, and you have to have those conversations to make sure that you are. And also to create that open space, that open communication, so that, yeah, if there are some things coming up, that folks can point that out to you, and it's a conversation and not an argument, right? Or a debate, or like, again, you're a horrible parent. It's more like we're tweaking as we go along. And these are things that are important to us. They're valuable to us as parents. So we're going to convey that to the kids. But first, we got to check in with each other.
Yeah. Very much,
Yes.
because and sometimes that's going to be hard to do in the structure of an existing. I mean, if you can't, that's a goes to your core values. Is that we were talking about are we teaching to our values, and then questioning your partner's values, or there's all kinds of conflict if your relationship with your partner is not conducive to that, is not strong enough to have talks with each other about each other.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to say, given that half or more first marriages don't make it, and everybody that does make it is on a bell curve, I'm going to say that's a really small percentage of, 5-10% of most marriages. Then if you're going to have kids, work on your marriage, I guess, is the short version of that, so that you can get on the same page.
I'm not a parent or a partner, so I don't want to give advice that feels like I'm over that way. But what I have noticed, for example, is that, like, for first-time parents, that baby comes, it's their first baby, and the mom is overprotective. I see this more often than not, where it's like, you didn't change the diaper my way, or like, they're doing this cry and that means this, and it's my baby, even though it's clearly our baby.
Yeah.
Overprotectiveness, usually with the second and third, less so. But the mom, it's the hormones, it's getting used to things, it's, I know my baby. And more often than not, because, of the way in which the mom is bonded with the baby, and again, the hormones, the dad is the one that is not doing it right, and he is not on the same page. And there's a lot of that, right? And so more often than not, they find a place where the mom is able to let go a little bit. The dad is able to be more active and find his footing a little bit faster with the baby. But it can be a point of contention, right? And so
Absolutely.
I say, the same way that, like, you have to, like, find that learning curve of how are we being parents together, and maybe there's something we've decided that we both do the way, this is the way to do it. And sometimes it's like, dad's going to do his thing and I'm going to do my thing, and that's going to be okay. But place, absolutely not easy, absolutely tricky, but those conversations are necessary, right? In the same way that when that new baby comes, those conversations are necessary and sometimes contentious. That's what's going to happen with some of these other values too, where it's like, no, I'm not questioning your values, but I'm questioning how you're doing it.
Yeah.
And they have to work through that in order to get to a place where it's like, all right, now I can point out this thing to you and it's not a big deal. Like that couple that I mentioned, they didn't just arrive at that. They've been working at that for some time. They've been together for some time. But it's not, there's a lot that comes out from conflict, right? We look at conflict and we try to shy away from it. But if everything is smooth, a good sailor does not learn to be that with smooth seas, right?
Right.
Is the positive part, but you got to go through it. You can't go around it.
You got to be with somebody who you can be in conflict with and still not be super threatened. It's not like, if I aggravate you, you're liable to shoot me or, poison me, or, it has to be okay to have a level of conflict, or, wow, there's just no getting around together.
For any conversation to take place, in any disagreement, in any critical philosophical discussion of a multifaceted issue in any space here on a podcast, like, we have to be able to disagree. This is something that's like, this is a huge underlying foundational issue, especially with the polarization that the pandemic created, is that we can no longer disagree and maintain relationship with each other
productively. Yeah.
There's this significant disconnect and alignment with those who only agree with me and my values and my opinion on things, and anyone who's outside of that is morally reprehensible.
Mm.
And like there are some things for me that are like human right, like moral things, but those are very, very few. Most things it's not even two-sided. There's 8 sides to things. There's
The world is complicated. Yeah.
faceted. There are reasons that people do things that we have never even like thought of occurring in our own lives. And the ability to have a civil conversation, to be in what is technically conflict. Disagreement is conflict.
Mm.
Not all conflict
Absolutely.
is bad. In fact, most conflict serves
A
to
purpose.
build and grow and deepen connection and relationships, right? The Relational Parenting Podcast, this is what we're all about, is if you, in your family, in your couplehood, whatever your parenthood relationship is, whatever that the quality of that relationship is going to translate to the quality of relationship that you experience with your children, and that your children will experience with other people for the rest of their lives, unless they do research and education to fix it. And so if you can't get good at conflict together, like there is a serious foundational piece missing from your family.
Work on it. If it's a problem, work on it.
And I say that as a person who is 1000% imperfect at conflict. That is not a judgment. That is not a me sitting on a high horse telling people what they have to do. That is from my current and past experience of life. If we can't get along and disagree at the same time and maintain love and connection, there's no hope for joy and living like a life worth living without that.
You were raised by people not good at conflict too,
I know.
And conflict goes, I know you know that. This is what, V may not have known that.
Good at conflict, and I feel like that is definitely a red flag as well. If you are good at, I think we all struggle with the idea of conflict. It's again necessary, and some of us are like, okay, more than others, and less conflict avoidant. But I feel like if you're good at conflict, that's a whole different problem.
Some of it is too, like you're saying, mothers who are going through huge hormonal shifts, just their brains are getting rewired, and people with past trauma. There's all kinds of reasons why people are not able to think straight. The lifetime of stress from being Black or from whatever it is, abuse in families. It wires your brain different and changes your expectations, and so there can be some real hard, and a lot of growth and change comes. It doesn't. People don't change radically because it's fun. It comes out of I have to do this or die. More, there's got to be some kind of pain, a cattle prod to get people to change. And I would imagine in the course of a workplace, that's got to be when you're asking managers to change, figuring out what the cattle prod is in a very civilized way is got to be a real challenge.
And also in a way that tells them, in the same way that you are trying to have that conversation with your partner and say, I'm not coming for your values. I'm coming for your actions. That is also the with leaders where it's I'm not coming for your leadership style. I'm not saying that your 25 years of leadership were wrong. That's not what I'm saying. Society is different. The workforce is different. And the culture that you're in now, your leadership style doesn't serve that at the moment. So how do we have that? How do we change that? How do we, make that you, but make that a you that serves you, as opposed to a you that is holding you back, that is holding the nation back.
Here's a new skill.
Yeah. It's adding. It's not taking away. It's not completely shelving that. It's saying, how can we make some adaptations? How can we make some changes that reflect the world we're in, that reflect the problems that you're having, and move towards solving that?
Yes.
Hey, there's another use for my beginner mind, new mind.
Beginner's mind.
Kanji.
Well, and that's what it is. like that could be translated to parenting too. Like, I, as a coach, I always tell parents, like, I'm not coming for your parenting style. I'm not telling you that there is one way to parent. I'm telling you there's there's new research, and there are new methods, and there is new information that we know better now. And I want to give that to you. I want to teach that to you so that you can incorporate it into your parenting.
Right.
I'm not coming to change who you are, change your values, change your intrinsic, innate, intuitive knowing of your children and what they need. I'm here because child development, brain development, science, has proven these different things. We know now that these things work and these things actually cause harm. And so why not add these tools to your belt? Why not learn these things and produce a child and that contributes to a more loving, connected, enjoyable society and life? Like who doesn't want the best for their child? There's not a parent in the room that would say no to that. And we know now that relationships and feeling connected in a community and having healthy relationships is the number one determining factor of feeling fulfilled in life. Number one is the quality of your relationships. So why wouldn't you want to learn that and teach that to your children?
New information, keep up with it. That even extends to the legal system. I mean, one of the few reasons you can get out of jail once you've been in jail is new information has come to light. It's got to be pretty radical, but new information is a great cause in all kinds of frameworks.
Yeah. And why wouldn't managers want to have the best information? They want the best for their company. They want the best for themselves. They want the best for their employees. Why wouldn't you want the new tools? Like, here's tools to add to your tool belt, your management tool belt. Right?
That's the cattle prod, right? Hey, you're not keeping up. You become a dinosaur. Get some new skills.
Yeah.
And you're right. The organization wants to be the leader in their industry and wants to be ahead of the curve. So it's a lot easier to have that conversation when it's framed that way, because I think it automatically feels like an attack. But framed in a way to create this open space, to create a way to unpack some of the discomfort and sensitivities and say, okay, now that we've done that and we know where we're coming from, we're all on the same page and feeling a little vulnerable, let's do something to help us feel more confident. Let's have tools that will help us in a way that's better.
So all those times when I would go to my boss and say, you're a stupid old dinosaur, quit doing things that way. Now I have a new tool in my box.
Exactly.
Right?
New information.
New information.
Right. And employees can be assholes too, right? Not just. All right. This has been so wonderful. I feel like it's so full of so much amazing information for parents and for anyone listening. And I'm just so grateful that you are here, that you are our guest, and that you shared all of this knowledge and perspective that you have with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah. This is fantastic.
I know it's been many moons that we talked, and getting this together is, not easy. In the background of a podcast, I can only imagine. So I appreciate, the work that y'all are doing to equip parents with better information and help support them in their journeys. And I definitely am very honored to be a part of this episode. And thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Thanks, V.
We'll have to, I say this to almost everyone, because everyone that we've had on is just amazing, but I'm like, all right, well, we need to get you back on for another episode next year. So thank you. And I wish you all of the best in your blossoming business.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
well,
good.
Happy parenting, everybody, and good luck out there. Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.